They forgot that before I was a grandfather, I was a corrections officer for 22 years. I know how people lie. I know what guilt looks like when it's trying to wear a normal face. And I know exactly when someone is hiding something from me. My son Curtis and his wife Renee had 2 kids. Their biological son, Drew, was 9. Their adopted daughter, Lily. Wait, no. I need to stop. Let me start from the place that still makes my chest tighten every time I think about it. Her name was Abby, 6 years old. She came to Curtis and Renee as a foster child when she was 3, and they adopted her officially 2 years later. I was at the courthouse that day. I held that little girl's hand while the judge signed the papers, and she kept asking me, "Does this mean I stay forever, Pop?" I told her yes. I told her forever means forever. I believed that. I thought my son believed it too. I started noticing things about a year before everything fell apart. Small things, the kind you explain away when it's your own child doing them. Drew would get new cleats for soccer season, and Abby's shoes would be held together with a strip of masking tape. Curtis said he hadn't noticed. Renee said Abby was hard on shoes. Drew's birthday party was at one of those big inflatable places with 30 kids and a catered spread. Abby's birthday, they took her to McDonald's, just the 4 of them, and Renee forgot to get a cake. Curtis told me Abby hadn't wanted a party. Abby was 6. She didn't know what she was allowed to want. I brought it up once, carefully, the way you do when you're trying not to start a war with your own child. Curtis looked me in the eye and said, "Dad, we love both our kids equally. Don't come in here and tell me how to raise my family." So I stepped back. I told myself I was seeing things that weren't there. I told myself I was one of those overbearing grandparents who can't mind their own business. I was wrong to do that. That is the part I carry. Last spring, Curtis called me on a Friday evening. He sounded relaxed, almost cheerful. He said they were taking a family vacation. 10 days at a resort in Cancun, all inclusive, the kind of place that costs somewhere around $9,000 or $10,000 for a family. When you factor in flights, the resort fees, the excursions. He was excited. He said Drew had never seen the ocean. I asked if Abby had ever seen the ocean. He paused just long enough that I heard the answer before he gave it. "Abby's going to stay with Renee's cousin," he said. "She and Renee's cousin's daughter are close. It'll be like a little vacation for her, too." I asked for the cousin's name. He gave it. I asked for a phone number. He said he'd text it to me. He never did. They left on a Tuesday morning. I know because I drove past Curtis on my way to my Tuesday coffee with my old partner from the department, and I saw the house dark, the car gone, the trash can still at the curb from the night before. I thought about Abby. I thought about that phone number that never came. I called Curtis. It went to voicemail. I called Renee. Voicemail. I told myself it was fine. They were traveling. Phones get switched off on planes. Thursday night, my phone rang at 11:40. I was already in bed. It was Abby. She was calling from Curtis's landline. He still had one, an old habit. He kept it for emergencies. She was whispering. Not the whispering of a child playing a game. The whispering of a trying not to be heard by something she was afraid of. "Pop," she said. "I'm hungry." I sat up. "Sweetheart, where are you?" "I'm at home," she said. I asked her what she meant by home. She said Daddy's house. I asked where Renee's cousin was. She was quiet for a moment, and then she dropped me off Monday. She said she'd come back, but she didn't come back. I was out of bed before she finished the sentence. "Are you alone in the house right now?" "Yes, sir." "Since Monday?" Another pause. "I think so." The days are hard to count. She had been alone in that house for 3 days. She was 6 years old. She had been alone in a locked house for 3 days, while her parents were sitting at a swim-up bar in Mexico watching her brother build sandcastles on a resort beach. I asked her if there was food. She said she'd been eating cereal, but the milk was gone and it was hard to open some of the other things. I asked her if she was cold. She said a little. I asked her if she was scared. She said, "I didn't want to call and get in trouble." That one sentence is the thing that broke something open in me that is never fully closed. I told her she was not in trouble. I told her to go get her blanket and sit by the front door and not open it for anyone except me. I told her I would be there in 20 minutes. I live 45 minutes away. I drove it in 20. When I pulled up, The house was completely dark. I mean completely. No porch light. No lamp visible through the curtains, nothing. I used my key, the spare Curtis gave me years ago when I watered his plants during a weekend trip. The house smelled stale. The air conditioning was turned up so high the digital display read 62 degrees. In a house with a 6-year-old child left alone inside it. Abby was curled up by the front door with her blanket and her stuffed elephant, the one she'd had since before she came to Curtis. She was asleep. She had been sleeping there, waiting for me, and she fell asleep waiting. I picked her up and she woke up and grabbed my neck so hard I had to catch my breath. "I knew you'd come, Pop," she said. I had to stand in that dark doorway for a full minute before I could move again. I carried her to the kitchen. The refrigerator had food in it. There was lunch meat, some leftover pasta, juice boxes, but the handle had a sliding bolt lock on it. A padlock slid through a latch someone had drilled into the refrigerator door in the frame beside it. The kind of thing you'd use to lock a storage unit on a refrigerator in a house with a first grader inside it. There was a box of cereal on the counter and a loaf of bread. That was what she had been left with. Cereal, bread, and a refrigerator she couldn't open. I have put handcuffs on men who did less than this. I took photographs of everything before I touched anything. 22 years in corrections taught me that evidence matters, that the story you can prove is the only story that counts in a room with a judge. I photographed the refrigerator lock, the near-empty cereal box, the thermostat at 62 degrees, Abby's cereal bowl in the sink from what looked like that morning. I walked through the house and photographed every room. I noted the timestamps on my phone. Then I made Abby scrambled eggs and toast and sat with her while she ate like she hadn't seen real food in days. Because she hadn't. I called Curtis again. Nothing. I called Renee. Nothing. I called Renee's cousin. I had her number from an old family gathering, still in my contacts. She picked up on the second ring. I asked her when she had dropped Abby off. She got very quiet. She said she was sorry she'd had a family situation come up. She'd called Renee, and Renee said it was fine. She said she assumed someone else was making arrangements. She sounded genuinely distressed, and I believed her. She wasn't the one who drilled a lock onto a refrigerator. I called Curtis one more time, and this time I left a voicemail. I said I had Abby. I said I had photographs. I said call me back in 1 hour or I was calling the police. I meant it. He knew I meant it, because when he called back 17 minutes later, his voice was the voice of a man who knows he is caught. "Dad, it's not what it looks like, Curtis," I said. I have 22 years of watching men say that exact sentence. Don't. He tried anyway. He said Renee's cousin was supposed to be there. He said it was a miscommunication. He said Abby was fine. She was a capable kid. I asked him what capable meant for a 6-year-old alone in a 62-degree house with a padlock on the refrigerator. He stopped talking. I asked him about the lock. Long pause. He said Abby had a habit of sneaking food at night, and Renee had read online that structured access to the refrigerator was a behavioral strategy. I am not a man who curses often. I made an exception. I told him I was keeping Abby with me until he returned. I told him that when he returned, we were going to have a conversation that he was not going to enjoy. I told him that if I ever had reason to believe Abby was in danger again, I would not be making phone calls first. He came back 6 days later. Renee's face when they walked into my house and saw Abby sitting at my kitchen table coloring. I have thought about that face many times since. It was not the face of a mother who had been terrified about her child. It was the face of someone recalculating. I had spent those 6 days doing what I spent 22 years doing, building a case. I had the photographs. I had a written record of every call I'd made and when. I had a statement from Renee's cousin, who was cooperative and remorseful, and once she understood the full picture, furious at Renee for putting her in that position. I had a pediatrician's appointment I'd taken Abby to. She was slightly underweight, mildly dehydrated, had a minor respiratory thing from the cold house that was already clearing up. The doctor noted everything. The doctor's notes became part of the record. I had also quietly called a family law attorney, a woman I knew from my years in the department who had since moved into private practice. She walked me through what I was looking at and what my options were. She used words like neglect and endangerment and grounds for custody modification. She was not speaking hypothetically. When Curtis and Renee sat down across from me at my kitchen table, Abby was in the back room watching a movie. I had made sure of that. Curtis started with the apology, the kind that spends most of its time explaining why the thing wasn't really that bad. Renee sat with her hands folded and said very little. At one point she said she didn't think Abby would have any trouble for a few days, that Abby was adaptable. I asked her if she would have left Drew alone in that house for 6 days with a padlock on the refrigerator. She looked at the table. I told them what I had done. I laid out the documents. I told them I had been in contact with an attorney. I told them I was not going to pretend that what happened was a miscommunication or a lapse in judgment. I told them I was filing for emergency guardianship of Abby. Curtis's face changed color. Renee started to cry. I told her that was not going to work on me. Curtis said I was overreacting. He said the family would be a laughingstock. He said this would destroy their life. I told him I had watched men in holding cells say the same things about the consequences of choices they had made, and I had spent my whole career on the wrong side of that glass from them. I was not going to be on the wrong side of it from my own son. I told him Abby deserved better, and if he couldn't give her better, then I was going to be the one who did. The next 8 weeks were the hardest of my life since I buried my wife. Curtis hired an attorney. Renee's family circled around them. My daughter-in-law's mother called me and told me I was a bitter old man trying to tear a family apart. I let her talk. I didn't respond. I had learned a long time ago that people who are defending the indefensible will run out of steam eventually, because there's nothing solid underneath them to stand on. What came out in the family court process was worse than I had let myself believe. The court appointed a guardian ad litem for Abby, a woman who interviewed Abba separately, gently, over several sessions. Abby talked, the way children talk when someone finally makes it safe enough to say the real things. She talked about not being allowed in the living room when Drew's friends came over. She talked about being told her artwork wasn't as good as Drew's. She talked about a birthday party at school where she'd asked if her parents could come and been told they had something with Drew that day. She talked about overhearing Renee say to someone on the phone that she sometimes forgot Abby was even there. That last one. That was the one that made the guardian ad litem's report very, very clear. The judge was a woman in her late 50s with reading glasses she pushed up onto her forehead when she was about to say something important. She pushed them up when she read her findings. She granted me temporary guardianship of Abby with a supervised visitation schedule for Curtis and Renee, and she required them to complete a parenting evaluation and family therapy before any modification to that arrangement would be considered. Curtis didn't look at me when she read the ruling. Renee did. I don't know what she was looking for in my face. I wasn't angry. I was just tired and sad and absolutely certain. Abby has been with me for 4 months now. She sleeps in the room that used to be my wife's sewing room, which I cleared out and painted the color she picked, a very specific shade of green that she described as the color of the inside of a watermelon. I bought her a nightlight shaped like a moon and a bookshelf, and enough books to fill half of it with room to grow. She still has the stuffed elephant. She sleeps with it every night. Last week, she drew a picture at school and wrote Pop Pop's house across the top in her uneven first-grade handwriting. Her teacher sent it home in her folder. I put it on the refrigerator that does not have a padlock on it, that she can open any time she wants, day or night, and take whatever she needs. She asked me once, a few weeks after she came to live here, if she was in trouble for calling me that night. I told her no. I told her calling me was the bravest thing she had ever done. She thought about that for a minute the way children do when they're deciding whether to believe something. Then she nodded and went back to her cereal. I don't know what happens with Curtis. I grieve that, some days more than others. He is my son and I love him, and I do not understand how he got from the boy I raised to the man who drilled a lock onto a refrigerator and flew to Mexico. I hope the therapy helps. I hope he finds his way to being the father both his children deserve. I have not given up on that. But I also know that hope is not the same as permission, and love is not the same as looking the other way. Abby asked me last Sunday if she could call me Grandpa instead of Pop Pop because one of her friends at school said Pop Pop was a baby name. I told her she could call me whatever she wanted. She tested Grandpa out loud a couple of times, like she was hearing how it sounded. Then she grinned and went back to whatever she was doing. She is still here. That is the whole point. She is still here, and she is warm, and there is food in the refrigerator, and when she calls for me in the middle of the night, I am 20 steps away. Forever means forever. I meant it when I said it in that courthouse, even if other people forgot.